Hello fun people, I'm Isaac Carlson, and on Following Dreams, I'm focused on exploring the stories of people who are following their passions and achieving their dreams. I want to help inspire you to pursue what you love by hearing how others have done it. But before we welcome our guest for today, be sure to take part in all of the magical places on the internet that I live. You can find all of my discussions on the wonderful world of Disney on my YouTube channel called Wotso Videos. Be sure to follow my adventures on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Wotso Videos. Consider supporting the show by joining my Discord and becoming a producer of the show over at patreon.com/WotsoVideos and getting the Following Dreams merchandise at wotsostore.com. Feel free to send me a comment or question at followingdreamspodcast@gmail.com. And if you enjoy what this show is doing, be sure to rate us over on iTunes. Today we're speaking to a man who is well known for providing good times and great conversations from the world of Disney for 4 years on his podcast, The Mouse Castle Lounge and Inside the Mouse Castle. With over 125 episodes which featured guests like Pete Docter, Glen Keane, Richard Sherman, Andreas Deja, and Don Hahn, he was able to express his love of Disney for the world, which allowed him to tour the Walt Disney Studios, spend time at the Walt Disney Family Museum, and this all even brought him to the red carpet of the Academy Awards. While that time of working on the Mouse Castle blog and shows has mostly come to a close, for new opportunities, his passion for being behind the mic hasn't stopped as he has forged ahead as a voice actor in Las Vegas. To listen to all of his interviews, you can go to themousecastle.com, and if you happen to need a voice actor, you can see his work at vegasvoiceactor.com. Welcome, Tim Callaway.
Wow. I think that's the best introduction I've ever received. Thank you, Isaac.
Absolutely. I'm very appreciative that you're on today, so you got to make a big impact into expressing how awesome you have been throughout your life.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been fun, and I'm not done yet.
Exactly. But right off the bat, I want to know what you are passionate about.
Oh, goodness. Creating. I've always been fascinated by the creative process, and I think that's a lot of what drove a lot of what I did on the Mouse Castle Lounge. Was I've had a lifelong passion for Disney, but I also was excited to know more about the people that created all these wonderful films and theme parks and what have you. So from that standpoint, creativity has always fascinated me. And I, spent, many years working a real job, and but I always had something going on the side. I was a radio DJ for 6 years back in the day. I did the podcast, of course, and now I'm doing voice acting, and I'm doing voice acting now at a time where, for most of my life, I've been doing, the safe, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday kind of job. And now that I'm a bit older, I wanted to do something that was for me and that was completely creative and a little terrifying, to be honest. But I feel happier and more fulfilled now doing stuff I love to do every day and to be creative and play around in my studio. I think I'm happier now than any time I've ever been in my life.
Yeah, it's that whole being able to create something and go into a passionate project with your full heart into it. That completely makes sense, and is definitely something that I try to prioritize in all of the projects that I do as well.
Good for you, and you should. And that's what's the expression of most people die with their music still inside them. We have an incredible capacity. All of us have this incredible capacity to create and to do creative things. And it doesn't happen to be on a major scale. I mean, it can be something that you just do because it makes yourself feel good, or something that you do for your family, or in our day of digital technology, anyone can start a podcast, and talk about what excites them. So I think it's something that a lot of people miss out on. I think this world would be a much better place if more people really exercise that creative side of them that they have deep down inside.
and taking advantage of the opportunities that are existing more than ever in being able to share something that they really care about, I think is something that's really important for people to at least engage with the idea of. See if that is something that they might be able to do long term. But going back a little bit, I want to know about how this all started for you. Could you talk about what you were like growing up? How did your initial passion for being an entertainer get started?
Oh, good grief. It's not like when I was a kid, it's like, oh, I want to be a movie star when I grow up. In fact, looking back, I can't honestly tell you what I wanted to be when I grew up. And to an extent now, it is the exact same thing. I still haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up. And that's kind of exciting. I remember coming out of high school, and while so many of my friends, had this plan. They were going to go to college. They were going to major in this, that, or the other thing. And this was the track that they were on, and they were, this is what they were going to pursue in life. Well, when I came out of high school, I didn't have a clue. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was kind of a theater nerd a little bit, in high school, and did school plays and things like that. So I always enjoyed that aspect of it. But it didn't occur to me that I would one day perform for a living. So I'm coming out of high school. I didn't go to college. I took a summer off, and my mom and I moved from. We lived in Orlando at the time, moved to Las Vegas, and, got a job and started working. And there was a local community theater in Las Vegas at the time. This would have been like the early 80s. It was called the Meadows Playhouse, and it was a professional theater at the time. Here in Las Vegas, it's long since gone away. But I tried out for a production of A Christmas Carol, and it was an original script, an original production that had been produced by the Meadows Playhouse. And I landed a small role in it, and that was just kind of fun, and I enjoyed doing it. But again, it wasn't something that, oh, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. I ended up doing, I don't know, 2 or 3 productions at the Meadows Playhouse over the course of 3 years. I didn't do it a lot. But in the meantime, I was working another job. Fast forward about, let's see, 8 or 9 years. And I'm listening to a radio station here in town, got the radio on. And they had a promotion that they started called Dare to be a DJ. And it was a contest where you would go down to this local broadcast school and basically audition. And the first prize was an internship at the station and a full scholarship to this particular broadcast schoul. And again, it was, well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that, So I wasn't taking it seriously. I truly wasn't. I just thought, oh, this is kind of fun. And so, the whole purpose of this promotion is this broadcast school is trying to attract students, and they're trying to, to generate business. So while I'm going through this auditioning process, they keep giving me the sales pitch. It's like, do you want to enroll? Do you want to enroll? And, they showed me the price of enrollment. It's like, no, I'm not interested. I'm just doing this for fun. Well, long story short, I won the contest. And I ended up getting a full ride to National Broadcasting School, an internship at the radio station, which at the time was KMZQ 100.5. It was kind of a hot AC at the time, so it was called Q100 when I first started working there, and then it later became a softer AC station that was Classy 100. But it started a 6-year stint as a DJ. Did that for 6 years. Got kind of tired of it because I was still working another job and it was exhausting doing both of them together. Then I went and worked in the real world again for, another, 20 years, give or take. And finally, after I worked for the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, what happens here stays here. And I worked in human resources, had a nice, cushy government job, paid well, great benefits. But after doing that for a number of years, I wasn't satisfied. There was this itch, that wasn't being scratched. So after, kind of and complaining to my girlfriend that I'm not happy doing this, and no knock on the LVCVA, it was a great organization to work for, but it's just I'd had enough.
Sure.
And finally, she says to me, do what you need to do. So I got out of that, and so I left the LVCVA. Now, at that time, I had already been doing the podcast for a couple of years, and that, I mean, if you let me backtrack on that a little bit, I'm kind of rambling a bit, is in, I don't know, around 2005. I was really always interested in Disney, but I was really fascinated with this story that had been developing at the time. Michael Eisner, who was the head of Disney, at that time, he was getting some backlash from the Disney community, even to a degree from stockholders, over how he was running the company. Now, Michael Eisner, to his credit, basically saved the company in the late 80s when it was about to be the victim of a hostile takeover and everything could have been sold off. But, Roy Disney brought him and Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg in to kind of save the company. So Eisner had done wonderful things with Disney for years, but now he was starting to do things on the cheap and doing it. They opened Disney California Adventure, which was kind of a bust. It was a Disney theme park done on the cheap. They were doing all these direct-to-video sequels to their animated features, which were not playing well. And there was this campaign started by Roy Disney called Save Disney, and I was kind of fascinated by this, so I was following this real closely. Well, on the Save Disney website at that time, Roy would post these blog articles written by Al Lutz, who was with a number of Disney fan sites at that particular time, Mice Age, where it was very critical of the Disney organization and management, and not just Michael Eisner, but the people that were running the theme parks. And it was fascinating stuff. And for someone like me who's old enough to have that faintest memory of Walt Disney as being a real live human being, and not just something someone we see on old YouTube videos, I thought it was pretty amazing that someone would be that critical and be challenging the Disney hierarchy like that. So I was fascinated by this theme site, this website called Mice Age, and then it had a spinoff. Mice Age was the news site and the commentary site. Then it had a spinoff that was a message board, and this is pre-Facebook. This was an equivalent to the social media we have today, but not nearly on the same scale. But it was a message board, and it had all these like-minded people coming in talking about their passion for Disney. I thought, this is really cool. Well, I started to post a lot on there and make a lot of comments on there. And, long story short, or long story very long, actually, at this point. But Todd Regan, who went by the nickname Dusty Sage on Mice Chat, he wanted to kind of expand what they were doing on Mice Chat, and he wanted to have like a news section where we would cover news items within the Disney organization. And it wasn't really like we were out there, generating the news stories ourselves. It was basically regurgitating a lot of existing stories that were already out there. But I was doing that for a little bit, and we'd write a few bullet points and then link to the main article. Well, at some point, and I don't know where the idea originated, whether it was something I came up with or something that someone at MiceChat came up with. In 2006, Neil Gabler was writing this expansive biography on Walt Disney.
Sure.
And I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to talk to Neil Gabler. I was very full of myself. And so it's like, I'm going to try to see if I can get an interview with Neil Gabler. What the heck? I did, again, another one of those things, didn't take too seriously. It's like, they'll probably say no. We're just a little, fan site out here in the, internet wilderness. And so I put in a call to the publisher. I left a message. And the next day I get a call back. Sure, Neil would love to talk to you. And that's really kind of where it started. I did the interview with Neil Gabler, who could not have been more gracious, and wrote up this rather expansive article in MiceChat. Eventually ended up doing other interviews, talked to Dave Bossert, an animator and historian now himself, with Disney. Just managed to talk a little bit at a time, kind of chipping away and doing more cool stuff within Disney and covering Disney and the world around it, particularly the history around it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that led to me starting my own blog, The Mouse Castle, where I just wrote about different things in Disney. That evolved into a podcast where when I started the podcast, I still wasn't quite sure what direction I wanted to take it. And if you listen to the earlier podcasts, I'm all over the place. I'm covering news. I'm getting, sound bites from Walt Disney Studios. Finally, it settled in to being an interview show where I talked about a lot of Disney history. Occasionally covered current things in Disney, but it was the history that really fascinated me. So I did that, and I did that for 4 years. But during that period, as I'm really enjoying doing this podcasting thing, I'm getting sick of my day job. And so I make a break, and it's like, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to turn this into something bigger. I'm going to build my online media empire.
It's a classic.
I don't have to tell you how difficult that is.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and after doing that for a couple of additional years and getting kind of restless with it, one of the traps you can run into when you turn a passion into a business is you can lose the passion. And to an extent, that is what happened. And I loved doing the podcast. I even started a second podcast, which you mentioned, Inside the Mouse Castle, with my friend Anthony Reynolds, one of the funniest guys I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. And I was trying to make something bigger out of this than I probably should have. So I was it was making me restless and frustrated, and I wanted to try something different. So for about a year, not too far from where I live, I would drive by this little strip mall, and there's a big sign out in front of one of the spaces that said the Voice Actor Studio. And I'm driving by it, and I see this big sign. It's like, well, that looks kind of cool. I should try that one of these days. And then a couple months later, I drive by it again, and I go, I really should check that out one of these days. A few more months would go by, same thing would happen. After a year of driving by this big, huge sign that said the Voice Actor Studio, I decided to go in, and I took I signed up for an introductory course. It was like, I don't know, little 2-hour presentation to give you a taste of the voice acting world and see if you're see if you're interested in it. And then you can, enroll in classes if you feel like it. Well, it took me about 30 seconds to realize, ooh, this is cool. This is something I really want to do. I took that intro class 1 week before my 54th birthday. And without sounding too cliche, it's changed my life. Melissa Moats is the driving force behind the voice actor studio. She runs it with her husband, Todd, Troy, who's also a great guy. And Melissa is a very successful, very accomplished voice actor. She's been doing it for, I'm going to say more than 15 years. I may be wrong on that, but she's been doing it a long time. And she is so passionate and so excited and loves what she does so much, it's infectious. You cannot help but get excited about the art of voice acting just by, spending a few minutes and talking to Melissa. Now, she doesn't sugarcoat it because voice acting, as any, entertainment medium, it's hard work, and it is hard to become a success in any type of entertainment or art. But, the great thing about the Voice Actor Studio is they teach you not only the technique of voice acting, but also the business of it. And, almost 4 years later, I've been doing it ever since and not looking back. So maybe this is what I want to be when I grow up.
So when you were working on the podcast, what ways were you expanding it, and how was the magic slowly kind of dissipating for you?
I felt I was repeating myself too much. I was very fortunate to interview more than 100 different people for the Mouse Castle Lounge. And there were some guests that I would have on repeatedly, and they were wonderful. People like Jim Korkis and Didier Guez and J.B. Kaufman, all these great Disney historians. And as good as they were, I was restless because, I'm starting to repeat myself too much. And in that search to find something more original or somebody different to talk to, it became less fun and more of a chore. And I'm ADD anyway, so you have to you always have to have something new to play with, or you lose interest. And that's kind of what happened.
Because at the beginning, when you were starting to really get your momentum, when you went to D23 Expo and you were able to talk to a ton of voice actors, that was all very new and very different for you. So that was what was getting that momentum really building for you. Is that correct?
That is correct. Oh, yes. And the cool thing about the podcast and the cool thing about the Disney community is that everybody knows somebody. And if you follow my progression of guests over the 4+ years that I did it, and actually I came back a couple years after that to do just to do some additional shows just to see if I still had it in me to do it. But there was a progression, and it started. My first guest on the Mouse Castle Lounge was Jeff Curdy. Historian, author. He did a lot of PR and marketing at Disney. He was with Imagineering for a while. He and I were friends on Facebook, and it was probably because of connections through MiceChat. I don't remember exactly how I friended Jeff Curdy, but we were connected on Facebook. And when I decided I wanted to do a podcast, I'm sure I sent messages and emails out to a number of different people, but Jeff was one of them, and he responded. And he did my first show, which actually turned out to be the first 3 shows. I talked with Jeff for well over 2 hours. And the awesome thing about Jeff is that for all his years with Disney, and his mind is just full of all this knowledge that he can recall. He tells wonderful stories. But that started, and then Jeff knew other people. I think other person I talked to was Paula Sigmund Lowry. Her and Jeff had been integral in developing a lot of the content for the Walt Disney Family Museum. And when I was at MiceChat, I had done an interview. I had covered the opening of the Walt Disney Family Museum, got to know their PR and communications person there, which led to more invites to the Walt Disney Family Museum to cover the openings of different exhibits and things like that. And that's where I started meeting more people. And a lot of the names that you mentioned over the intro that I had interviewed, a good deal of those were because of contacts that I had made at Walt Disney Family Museum events. So one thing led to another. And this person knows this person, and you need to talk to this person over there. And then I could also, as you're building this body of work, I can go back and use that to attract other guests. It's like, well, I talked to Lella Smith, head of the ARL, and I've got I did Pete Docter, who I happened to just run into covering the opening of the Tyrus Wong exhibit. Got to talk to Tyrus Wong, over 100 years old at the time that they had a retrospective of his work, and he's known at Disney for his work on Bambi. And then had a remarkable career in Hollywood outside of Disney as a concept artist, and did all sorts of art on his own. But you talk to this person, you talk to that person, you talk to this person, and one thing leads to another, and then you build this body of work. But I reached a point where I again was getting restless, and so I needed to do something different. Plus, not to mention the fact that I was not generating a nickel of income from doing podcasting, despite my best efforts. It wasn't happening, and certainly what little money I was getting, like from advertising revenue and things like that, wasn't enough to support me. I had retired from the LVCVA, so I was getting some income, but it's like, still got to pay the bills. And that's not to say I jumped to voice acting to make a lot of money. You never, kids don't ever get into voice acting with the notion of if you're going to make a lot of money. You go in for the passion for the work, and if you happen to make the money, then that's a bonus.
Yeah, you have to go into it initially with the idea that you're just attempting to explore it. And if things work out, if you continue to do it long enough, that's when things can really start to click and it can become a career, which it sounds like is kind of what's been happening to you, is you've been able to just keep moving along and going down the path of being playful and exploring what interests you. And you've been able to make that into something, which is really exciting.
It really is. And it's kind of funny. I've been doing voice acting full time now for almost 4 years. And, just like with everything, when it starts out, it's very new, it's very exciting. Mm-hmm. And last year, I felt myself getting into the same trap that I got into with the podcast. I started getting a little too consumed by the business side of it. Now, the fact that I had gone through that experience with the podcast kind of refocused me, and I was able to kind of reset myself. I have a friend of mine, Heather, who every year, rather than make New Year's resolutions, she comes up with a word of the year. And this is like the idea or concept that you're going to make the focus of your year. And I'd never done it before, but this year I was looking back on what I had done last year, and I saw myself making choices that were based more on business and less on the art, less on the passion of doing voice acting. So my word of the year, and this is the first time I've done it, is fun. So my intent on the projects that I choose to audition for, on how I market myself, is it has to be fun or I'm not doing it. And it's working. I'm noticing a difference. I feel my performance is improving. My auditions are improving. I am having fun. I'm not so consumed by the business that I forgot why I got into it in the first place.
I really love that. And that resonates with me a lot as well, is that especially towards the end of last year, I was going through a similar idea that I was trying to diversify everything that I was doing to try to grow a more, in my mind, legitimate business, a more diverse business. And that took away from like the passion of being able to discuss Disney through the podcast and through my YouTube videos, particularly, that was getting taken away. And I think it's important to find that balance, but going towards the passion and keeping that in the forefront, I think is super important. And so making your year about fun is awesome to me. That's super cool.
Thank you. And it's the year of fun. It comes from the fact that last year I found myself auditioning for a lot of like corporate narrations, what we call explainer videos. In Europe, they call them image films, which are a little more dry. It's that professional, more narrative tone that you bring to it. And I had booked plenty of jobs like that in the past, but I slowly found out, and the cool thing with voice acting is when you start out, you should try everything. And there's so many different aspects to it. When you say voice acting, most people just think, animation and video games. Well, there's also e-learning and corporate work and commercial work and audiobooks, phone system IVR recordings. There's such a wide spectrum. And when you start out, you should try everything. But then don't be afraid to change gears and focus on one or two specific genres that you're really passionate for. When I started in voice acting, I wanted to do e-learning and commercials. It did not occur to me that I could do animation or video games. I didn't think I had the chops for it. Well, now that's almost exclusively of what I auditioned for. I still love e-learning, so it's e-learning and character voicing that I enjoy the most, and that's what I go after the most. Do I still audition for the corporate work and for the commercials? Absolutely. But I make my focus on the stuff that, really excites me, things that, to coin a phrase, spark joy, And that's what I found. That's where I am now. I am in a much better place creatively now because I know that I'm working in an arena that I absolutely love to work in.
That was something that I heard when I was researching you from when you made your comeback and did 4 extra episodes of your podcast, that you were saying that you hadn't done any of those projects yet about animation or video games or anything, and that you had mainly stayed in that. So it's interesting to hear you now talk about attempting to focus more on those exciting projects for you. And so
yes.
when you choose that, do you tell the organizations that you work with that attempt to help you get those jobs that this is what you're focusing on? How do you make sure that you're communicating that's what you want to do?
You know what's interesting? I didn't tell them, they told me.
Interesting.
I have 3 agents, and almost exclusively they send me character-driven stuff. It's for video games. It could be a commercial where it's not like just this voice of God narration. There's a playfulness to it. There's either a character at the center of it, or that it's just something more fun. Sometimes you can be so close to you that you don't see it. You don't see the forest for the trees. The first agent I ever booked or ever signed with. They had sent me, I think, a couple of narration type things, corporate explainer video type things. And then after a while, they started sending me this character-driven stuff. And I was too stupid at the time to realize, hey, maybe this is the direction I need to be going. And even that said, the first 2 gigs I ever booked as a professional voice actor were character-driven roles. Again, didn't click. I was still too new to realize it. It's not necessarily that you find your particular niche. Your niche will find you. And that's what happened with me. I didn't make necessarily a conscious decision to switch gears and work on more character-driven stuff. I found that was the work that people were sending me. It's like, okay. And, oh, by the way, I'm having a lot of fun doing this, so maybe I should keep doing this.
That it's suddenly you see the demand for it. And if it's something that you really care about and realize that it's something that excites you, then there's no reason to ever turn it down. So that makes a lot of sense. But that's so cool that that's your experience, that you've just kind of just kept stumbling upon these things that all kind of build up to this final career. Even though it was like 50 years into your life, you didn't know that this was going to be your path. And now you're going for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's daunting because, I'm competing with people for jobs that are around my age and have been doing this for 30, plus years. That can be a little intimidating, but I still love it. And you can't go into this business worrying about the competition. You can only work on your art and your performance. I can't control what a casting director or an agent or another voice actor does. I can only control my performance, and I'm going to give it the best shot that I can, and let's see where it goes.
When you initially went into being a part of that academy where you began to learn about voice acting, did you find that your experience as a radio personality with the internship and your experience with the podcasting world contributed to making everything click a little bit easier? Like, did you feel the continuity of the voice acting being a logical next step for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the one thing about voice acting, though, it is an entirely different flavor of working on the mic. There's a lot of people who work in radio who cannot make that jump to voice acting because they are two distinctly different art forms. One of the worst things that anyone can tell an aspiring voice actor is, oh, your voice sounds great, you should do voice acting. Having a great sounding voice doesn't help as much as you think it would. You have to have the acting chops. You have to, be able to perform. And you have to learn that part of it. Now, one side of it that did help in moving me along at the voice actor studio was the fact that I had done podcasting, and it wasn't the performance part of that, but it's the fact that I could do audio production. And it wasn't like I was formally trained in it, but you learn enough by doing. And you stumble over yourself 100 times, but you figure out how to do it. One of the things that helped me get to that point is there wasn't as big of a learning curve for editing. When you do voice acting in the age of digital technology, anybody with a quiet space and a microphone and a computer can do voice acting. Doesn't mean they should, but it's so easy to do it. But you do need to learn not just the art of your performance, but you need to learn the technical side. And you don't need to be you don't need to get a degree in audio engineering, but you do need to know enough that you can record clean audio in the booth that you've created at home. Most voice actors work at home. Once upon a time, the only way you could get voice acting gigs was to be in New York or L.A. And if you recording from home was only for those that had the deep pockets and the equipments to do it. And then you didn't email it or post it online. You sent out tapes or CDs. So it's so much easier now to become a voice actor because the technology is there. But you do need to learn that part of it, and you do need to get good at all of those aspects, not just the performance, but the audio engineering, the marketing of it. I spend more time promoting myself and editing than I do recording.
Yeah, that is so true, that there's so much that goes into packaging the content and the performance as much as there is actually creating that.
Exactly. You'll hear it constantly when you get into voice acting. A voice actor's job is to audition, And that's true to a point. I actually got into an online discussion in a voice acting group that I'm in on Facebook, where somebody who was relatively new to the game said, that, they had heard that voice acting was 99% auditioning. And now that they're in it, it feels more like 99.9%. And then, I came in and corrected him. I said, well, if you're doing it right, it's about 50% auditioning and 50% marketing. Everyone auditions for jobs, but the people that are truly successful are the ones that are able to market themselves in voice acting. And that means reaching out to production houses, to indie producers, to agents, to the gatekeepers and the people that are doing the hiring. When you start in voice acting, get to the point where you're good enough to cut that really good quality demo, and that's what you use to promote yourself. Get the demo, build the website, and market yourself. Audition as much as you can, but also market.
Yeah, because you'd rather someone decide that you're the perfect fit for the role instead of going on the search to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about, is that's a huge part of doing that and being a part of voice acting, is to get in front of those people before everyone else. So how have you made the steps to market yourself, and how have you gotten in front of those people now?
It's a grind. It's when I first started, to more aggressively do marketing. I went online. I did a search for like the top 100. I wonder if it was radio markets. And now I don't honestly remember. I have to go back. I have it printed out somewhere. But I went out to find the top 100, let's say, radio markets in the U.S. And it had them ranked from 1 to 100, all the cities and their population base and all of that. I started at 100, did a Google search for video production, because you'll find more than you will audio production. And then I just started started emailing them. And it's a shot in the dark. It's a lot of production houses. They don't hire voice talent directly. They'll go through different job sites or pay-to-plays or whatever. But you have to go in, take that approach with kind of the mindset that I'm not looking to get a job. This is the start of a conversation, and let's see where this goes. Now, you can email dozens, even hundreds of production houses before you get a reply back, or at least an acknowledgement that you exist. For the more promising leads, you always follow up with a phone call, because there's a little more personal touch there. And goodness, I use that. I use LinkedIn. There's from these different companies that you find out who works there, and then you connect with them on LinkedIn. And you can do that too if you're regardless of what niche in voice acting you want to do. If even in animation and video games, you can find the credits for anybody on IMDb is a fantastic resource for that. If you find somebody who's working on a particular show that you think is good, and it can be at every level. It can be with a major studio, or it could be with a small indie studio, but connect with these people on social media, and that doesn't mean that you connect with them on social media and then you hit them up for a job. That's not how that works. But again, it's about starting a conversation and engaging with them where they know you're a voice actor, but not doing the really hard sell. You have to play the long game when you're marketing yourself. And it's a process, and you've got to love the process. If you don't love the process, this industry will eat you alive.
For sure. I feel like I've really enjoyed LinkedIn for a similar reason, that it's such a cool idea for a social network, that it's suddenly about reaching out to find the different professionals that you want to connect with. Because unlike Facebook or Twitter and Instagram, other of those, it's much more social. So it feels uncomfortable to try to connect with someone in a way when you're trying to do something professional. So I've definitely been looking into LinkedIn as well for exactly things like this for the podcast.
Yes.
And I think that you're so right as well about loving the process. I think now it's really easy to see and find all of these people who are really successful in entertainment, such as huge YouTubers as well. And people want to be those. And it's a similar thing where it's a lot of time. Well, people get to see a lot of those short, amazing clips that people make, but then there's all of the back end that goes into it. All the time editing, as you talked about, and creating everything and marketing it all. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from with all of this.
I've seen your YouTube channel. I am in awe of the amount of hits you get on there. And that did not happen overnight. You worked it, right? It wasn't just it wasn't just throwing the videos out there and hope someone finds them. You went out and you pushed it and got the buzz going out there. I mean, creating a big audience doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, it's been about, I'm in my 5th year now of working on making videos on consistently a weekly basis. So it's definitely been a long time coming for me. I've went through a lot of similar things of trying to figure out what type of subsection of the giant fandoms of Disney do I want to explore, and making all of that content. So I appreciate that you were able to see it and enjoy at least what I've been able to build up with it. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's fun stuff. You're doing good work, and it's very easy to see how passionate you are for what you're talking about. It really comes through, and that's important. You're excited to do it, and that that in itself will it builds your audience. Because it's like, hey, this guy's really having fun with this. This is cool stuff.
And that was something that I was really impressed by, again, with what you were doing on the Mouse Castle Lounge, seeing all of the people that you were able to talk to and how you were able to have these in-depth discussions with everyone. When I started doing research for this podcast, it just came through so much when I was looking up past interviews for people to try to figure out what questions other people had asked. So when I saw yours, it just came through so much that I can only hope that Following Dreams and this podcast could go off and be as influential in the space as what you were able to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Be patient, and don't be afraid to reach out directly. I mean, if you have people that you want to talk to at whatever level, go for it. My list of people that I never got on the Mouse Castle Lounge is immense. I had, twice, 3 times as many, refusals or no's, compared to the 100 of guests that I finally landed. And take your time, and be patient. If they say no today, maybe it's because the timing isn't right. But reach out to the gatekeepers, reach out to the PR people. It's not difficult to get on, the email list for Disney as a member of the media. That opened up a lot of doors for me, but it's like, try everything. And ask everybody, and eventually someone's going to say yes. The worst thing that happens is they say no, and nothing changes. You just move on to the next person, which is kind of the same concept for auditioning. You have to have a high threshold of rejection, because you're going to get told no, a ton more times than they're going to say yes. And actually, in voice acting, it's rare that they tell you no. Usually, one of two things happen: they hire you, or you never hear from them again. So there's not a lot of rejection per se. You'll never get that email. You won't get that email back. It's like, dude, you really sucked on that audition. It doesn't work that way. But it's just you audition and forget. You move on to the next one, and okay, the last one didn't hit. Maybe this one will. You got to keep that optimism, and you have to keep moving forward.
Exactly. You can't get something unless you're willing to at least ask for it. That's something that I've heard recently that's really resonated with me. And going forward with this is you just keep trying to ask the people that you want to speak to what you want, what you're wondering about. You got to ask what you want. And I think that's something that people just have to be prepared for when getting into this crazy entertainment world. But there's definitely a level of being able to succeed in it. It's not impossible. We're two clear examples of it. It doesn't matter what age you are, when you start. It doesn't matter. You just got to forge ahead with the things that you care about.
Absolutely.
So now that you've been able to work with so many companies such as Clash of Clans and Georgia State University Athletics, where do you see your journey going forward now?
I have no idea. No, I know I want it to be in animation and in video games, all the character-driven stuff. You're always told that you need to have that business plan and that that overall outlook. This will run counter to what all the business experts will tell you, but the fact that I just want to keep doing this and make a living doing it. I'm not looking for massive stardom or anything like that. And if you get into voice acting, that's not what that's about either. I just want to continue to make a living doing what I love. I'm fortunate that I get the opportunity to go after some really really fun stuff. I I say often that I know I have made it as a voice actor because I'm getting turned down for a higher class of jobs. Um, where I am now is at a point that I really could not have envisioned 4 years ago. I really couldn't. And that's just the fact that I am making making a living and paying the bills, being a voice actor. And every morning I get up and I go down the hall into my studio and I get to have fun and I get to create stuff. And even the marketing side of it, which I've probably made sound like drudgery. It's not if you approach it from the right angle. It's like you need to find the fun in it, and make that marketing and how you promote how you promote yourself, make it an extension of who you are as a person. Don't worry so much about writing this perfectly professional email proposal. It's like, no, write it like you. You can be informal and sound like you and still be professional. So, where do I see myself in 5 years? I have no idea, but it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, as long as you keep having fun, the opportunities and the experiences that you'll have will continue to be impactful in your life. Finally, Tim, I want you to tell the listeners what you feel is the number one piece of advice that would help them follow their dreams so that they can have exciting moments that will happen in their life.
Stop talking about it and start doing it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I've taken up a ton of time rattling on with different things, but what it comes down to, it's like, where I am today is because I made up my mind to stop talking about it and start doing it. And that's it.
Don't overthink it. Just start taking action and things will be able to be learned along the way. I totally completely agree with that.
Yeah, and don't get obsessed with the outcome. Don't worry about what you want to be down the road. We get so attached to worrying about outcomes and what happens if I do this and how do I make this successful, that we forget to be in that moment. And when you're creative, you've got to be in that moment and not thinking in the back of your head, it's like, okay, I need to book this job because it pays really well or something like that. No, I got to book this job because this is what I do and I love doing it.
It's about enjoying the journey of it all.
Absolutely.
It's the day to day. Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to hear about your story today.
Thank you, Isaac. It's been a pleasure.
To all of you who are listening, if you haven't seen Tim's work before, you can find links to everywhere he is on the internet in the description. And if you enjoyed this discussion, let me know by rating the podcast and subscribing. Also, it would mean a lot if you followed my Disney adventures and discussions over on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Wotso Videos, and consider supporting this show by donating on Patreon and purchasing the Following Dreams merchandise, which will also be linked below. To all of you fun people who are out in the world, thanks for listening, and have a magical day.